Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
This is Greg Hutchins. Good morning.
Good morning, Greg. Hey, it's been a little while since we chatted, but one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is not all the news and information that we provide as reliability and quality professionals is good news. We try to shade it that way, or show the silver lining as best we can, and all those other things. But sometimes you just have bad news for your boss. And recently, a question came up to me. It was related to Chris and I talked about it the other day. Was how do you convey the benefit of an FMEA that's only partially done? But what Chris and I didn't get into it too much was they were asking the wrong question. They made the wrong request of their reliability engineer. That their request was, and people that heard the episode with Chris would remember this quote. The boss wanted, I want a eye-popping, stunning chart, about your FMEA, your reliability activities. And if somebody asked me that question, I'd give them the spoofiest PowerPoint, rotating text and flashing lights and fireworks and everything else. Is that eye-popping enough for you? Doesn't mean anything. It conveys nothing except that I can animate stuff on the site, on the page. But where in the world did that request come from? And what has it got to do with us actually doing a good job and making a good product for our customers? So I would have personally lost it and just said, that's a stupid request. What is it you really need? What are you going to do if you get that? What's the result going to be? What's the purpose? What are you trying to put lipstick on a pig here or something? What are you doing? But that's just me. I don't know. Am I overreacting to what probably, and it's out of context, right? I only got a snippet of what the request was. But I was like, really? Do management really think they can run a business with that kind of stuff?
So the easy answer is yes, they can. 2, I think you've been in on your own too long, Fred. And I'll give you an example of that. I got my daughter, who's a product manager intern. Company will remain
undisclosed. We don't have any NDAs with all
exactly.
of it.
They're doing a Kaizen, a 3-day Kaizen on something, okay? And she's sitting there. This is the first time she's ever been to a mass group meeting. And she calls me last night and says, what's going on? These people can't make a decision. And and she's going on and on. And I said, well, first of all, understand, these are people who are in the company. They've been there 20 years. They're 20 years older or 30 years older than you. And they don't want to rock the boat. So that basically means that there is kabuki going on. She says, well, what's kabuki? And I said, kabuki is like Japanese theater. What you see in front of you is really not what's going on. There's it's an onion. You peel one layer and then there's another layer in the onion.
Well, and you get it. There's politics and relationships and conflicting and priorities. If we approve this, then I don't get that budget, and then I lose.
Secret handshakes, all that stuff, right? Culture, and people don't want to make a decision. And the reason why I say you've been on your own too long is if your boss wants something, and you worked with him or her for 10 years, 5 years, and you want to keep your job and have good relationships, you'll basically play along to get along.
No, I didn't. I never did that, even when I was in the Army.
Oh, come on. Have you ever been fired from a job, Fred, and had to pay, you've had child support?
No, I got laid off.
You had to get food on the table. Yeah. You got to pay.
Yeah,
pay for
I got laid off. I got laid off from a job. I was being irascible enough. They wanted the absolute impossible for some data analysis. And I said, there's really isn't an answer for that. And it was, and I survived 3 layoffs, but I was like, I've got a principle here that I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, you don't lie. You basically say the truth.
Well, It was whatever it was. And it was probably a handful of other things. And they were laying off 10% of the organization. So I got laid off. I had a job within a month.
But how about omission? Is that lying?
Yeah, I think it is.
No, you got a boss and you got yourself child support, a wife that's crazy, excuse me, a significant other that might be irrational.
It was one of those things that
$4,000 monthly house.
No,
your boss wants something, you're going to tell the boss, him or her, you bet. How high?
I have never done that.
It's a classic example. They say jump, how high, which direction, and when you want me to do it.
No, I don't think that's a viable way to work. In my opinion, we kind of ran all off this criteria, but it's consistent with, how do you tell your boss bad news? I remember when I chose to leave my last job that I had, and my boss kind of in the out interview says, you did amazing things. You got all this stuff done. I basically just stayed out of your way. And if I suggested or asked you to do something, if you weren't interested, you just didn't do it. I says, yeah. Some of your requests were things I wasn't interested in, and I didn't think they'd be useful. And he said, yeah, you told me that, but you were doing so good finding your own way to really make a difference in the organization in all these product lines that I couldn't reprimand you because you were outperforming everybody else in the organization, in our team. And at one point, my director came over and she said, am I running this group or are you? And I looked at her like, what do you mean, boss? And this is my boss's boss at that time. And she said, 2/3 of the engineers in this group are working on projects you created and brought into the team. And I have to pay them and manage them, but you're the one telling them what to do. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. Cool. And so I learned early on in my career and in education is that, I think Carl has a quote for it. It's not like in matters of fashion, go with the flow. In matters of principles, stand like a rock. And yeah, I was pretty tough to convince to do stuff if I wasn't interested in it or didn't want to do it. All in the military, in all my jobs. And I think it's the benefit of being on my own now is that I can fire a client, whereas it was tougher to fire my boss.
That's the point I'm saying, is that you've been too long on your own. When you're in a company and you have to deal with a culture, and you have a lot of commitments, financial or otherwise.
Oh, yeah. But if you also have your heart in the game, and you really want to, I guess I'm motivated by something different. Some people are motivated by getting promoted in their organizations. Other people are motivated by being well respected within their organization. There's all kinds of motivations for people at work, and some of it's financial. I agree with that. Yet it's when somebody's taking shortcuts and doing only short-term things so they can move on to their next job or next company with a better resume, I think that's just destructive for themselves in the long term and for the organizations they interfere with. I really believe that. And I think the churn of jobs and positions and people moving from one position to the next, and many people believe the only way to get promoted these days is move to another company. And they get a great pay raise, and then they come back to the organization, they're 3 pay grades up and making a ton of money and really don't know what the hell they're doing, in my opinion. But that's just me. I'm sorry.
No reason to apologize. I would say it depends on how you deal with your boss, and that depends on context. If you're free to move and you're in an organization that empowers people to speak up, that's great. A lot of organizations have a lot of people who are maintainers.
Yep.
And employees who are maintainers are basically paid to keep the organization lubricated and running. If you're a hypo and you can run a P&L and basically run people, meaning, well, I shouldn't say run people, manage people, so you can reach your outcomes, that's great. But it requires different skills. The skill with your boss, if he or she wants something and it's important to her, it should be important to you. And at that point, you've got a career decision to make. Are you going to comply and do, or do the best you can, or are you going to chirp up knowing that you might be reassigned to oblivion?
Yeah. It was, I think, that's where I probably clashed. I know my last position, and he told me on my way out of the job, it was like, the stuff you wanted to do, nobody else could do. No, and you just did it and made such a huge impact that we really don't want to lose you. But it was like, if you want to leave, well, good luck, and I'm sure you're going to do well. He didn't stand in my way either, or counter offer anything else. I don't think he could. I don't think he had a lot of leeway in that. But our discussions were always friendly, and we'd butt heads and go have a beer, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't animosity at all. And he would, put pressure on, saying, this is really what we need to do. We need to go after this. And if I could see what he was seeing and why it was important, it's very likely I probably wouldn't work on it. But there'd be some things I'd look at it and go, that's just, one, I'm not interested. And two, I don't see the value of that. And then it wasn't ever communicated in a way that made any sense to me. And plus, I already had a full-time job, kind of thing. And like, no. But it was possible to say no to my boss. And it was never, I was never threatened with being fired or reassigned or diminished in my, performance or anything else. It was, no, let's find something that I can actually contribute on in that intersection of stuff that I'm good at, that I want to do, and it's useful. And if it doesn't hit that intersection, it's very likely I'm not going to waste my time on it. And I think he respected that, but we still, on the margins and in various occasions, it was, at one point in one of when I was at HP, I kind of burned out a couple of bosses because they didn't know what to do with me. And I finally convinced the organization finally had me and one other guy that were starting up the reliability part of the program to be self-managed. And at some point, the director came back and said, you're doing a great job, but now there's 4 of you. I really need to have a manager here because I'm the one stuck doing your paperwork, all the back end manager stuff. And I really need somebody else to do that. And the only criteria was, she first asked the two of us that started this project, do you want to be the manager? And we both said no. And we both didn't want to work for the other one. And we also both didn't want to be managers. And so she said, well, then you need to go hire somebody. And all right. So we found a wonderful candidate, and he came in, and he's the one I continued to say no to about stuff. I had one horrible boss I had no trouble saying no to. He was frustrating as all get out. It was one of those people that just couldn't make a decision. And, he said, oh, you should go to this conference. You need to do this, this, and this, and talk to these people and do all this stuff and be a presenter. And I said, great, here's my travel request. I need your signature in order to book flights and do all the other stuff. And it wasn't until 3 days before the conference he got around to signing it. And it's like, you just cost us a couple $1,000 because it's late. What is your problem? But anyway, I digress. But yeah, I think you have to create a circumstance, of conditions with your employers, your boss, those other folks and it's incumbent on them, I think, to create an atmosphere where you can say no. Otherwise, it just sucks the soul out of people, and they end up being an automatron or a yes man or one of those things that really doesn't bring much joy to your life or to the work you do. And it shows. I think it really shows. People that were literally afraid of their boss because they don't want to lose their job for all the various reasons, I don't think we have the opportunity to really do their best work.
Where do I come in?
Aren't you glad I'm not one of your kids?
Yeah, well, yeah. Let me rephrase that. I'm glad you're not an employee of mine.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic with bosses because I've been one, and I've been a bad one. Why? Because I'm a death march type of guy, and that doesn't work anymore.
No, there's people they'd be in another company in a heartbeat.
Well, that's the problem these days. 50% of the employees want to find a new job in 24.
A couple of years ago, it was like the great migration from one position to the next. It was the people quitting their jobs. What did they? There's a term I didn't know existed before. It was quiet quitting.
Yep.
I didn't really understand that, but it was like record numbers of people were moving to new positions.
And quiet quitting also means you're dogging it.
Yep.
You're occupying space and time and not working at it, or you're doing two jobs at the same time.
Yeah, which working remotely kind of brought on the capability for some people who are milking that a little bit too much. So I think that's not ethical in my mind.
And now there's called quiet employment, where the employers are ghosting applicants.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, if your boss wants something, just be careful and comply. If you want to be mouthy, and I'm talking from the boss's point of view, that's fine. But make sure you understand and you have an understanding of the rules of engagement between you and the boss. Because most employees, individual contributors, are horrible, plain ass horrible managing up. They don't know how to manage their bosses.
Yeah.
And bosses, quite honestly, with big spans of control, just simply don't care about people quite often. Why? Because they have 30 people under them,
And well, there's also I think it's a coupling with the phenomena of people moving positions more often. It's, well, if you're not going to be here, I'll hire somebody else.
Yep.
It's even senior folks, high performers, everybody else, you're going to move anyway, so why do I invest in you? There's a meme or a quote out there is like, why should I invest in the training? They're just going to use that at our competitors. And well, what if you don't train them?
And that's even worse when non-competes are unenforceable.
Yeah, apparently that's kind of working its way through the system where I think here in California, they've already outlawed that.
And the FTC outlawed it nationally 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, no, I heard something about that. But part of it is the ability and willingness to move and change careers and all those parts and pieces for all kinds of motivations. The fuels, it's kind of a vicious circle. Fuels, well, it's, I'm not going to, either you do what I tell you to do or I'll find somebody that will. Kind of attitude, and it just reinforces that you're just a body turning the crank on some process that we have. And that phenomena in my mind of that attitude on both sides is we're losing the ability to get the best work, the best innovations, the best resources, or the best solutions to really compelling problems. Because if I'm an employee in that realm and my boss tells me to do something, I just do it. But I know in my heart it's the wrong thing to do. I'm not going to work my tail off to, show that this is a waste of time. It's I think, frustrating. I haven't seen lately, job satisfaction polls. They used to do those all the time.
They suck now.
It's part of it. But I also know that working on your own, I've met plenty of people over my career that, have tried it and went right back into corporate life or went back into a business somewhere, that they weren't cut for uncertainty about everything. Are they going to get another client? Are they going to pay you when you get done with it? You got to sort out your own health care. And you don't do staff meetings anymore, but you pay taxes, a lot more taxes. But the idea is that I think there's structural things going on that, in my mind, you still got to say no to your boss. And you hit it on the head, is you got to know how to manage up and to build those relationships. If they're not setting the stage that it's safe to say, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea, and here's why. here's what we should do instead, then, well, for me, it's not a good fit for me. That's for sure.
I know we got to wrap this up, Fred, and I'll just say one final thought. You were kind enough to introduce me to your mastermind group, and I come across sometimes like an asshole, because I focus on show me the money. I'm more sympathetic with the bosses than with the individual contributors, the employees. And obviously there's some friction because as I expound on the point of view of the company, the organization, the boss,
the stakeholders, the shareholders.
Yes, it rubs people in our little mastermind group the wrong way. And I don't mean that. It's just different point of view. And what you depends on, what you see depends on where you sit. I just ask, and going back to your initial query, if your boss wants something, try to understand his or her point of view, be sympathetic, develop some rules of engagement. And if you want to differ, fine, do it respectfully. That's my only thought.
Oh, yeah. No, that goes without doubt. You don't tell them to take a hike because they can say that and mean it.
Yeah, don't do FUs. That's for sure. Yeah,
none of that. But it's that might be a topic for a whole nother discussion is how do you manage up and it's a skill. It really is. It's part of empathy. It's part of understanding your customer, basically, as an employee. Your boss is one of your many customers for your work. All right, I get it. But yeah, I still tell clients and bosses, no, I guess that's just in my DNA.
You mean the fact that you went on into outer space on this one?
Where is that to?
Okay, Fred.
All right, I'm not looking for any options to send resumes over to you. I tell you.
No. That's like I said, a death watch. You don't want to work for me.
No, I get it. All right, Greg. Well, good luck hiring anybody. I hope you don't have any positions open.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.